Tasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine Shri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Jayādvaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Jayādvaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna
Vishnupad Padamansa Pradikacharya Stotra Shri Srimad A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Raj Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sham Kund Radha Kundigiri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadip Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Ki Jai Gangamai Ki Jai Jamanamai Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari Go. Welcome. And we're reading from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Lila, Chapter 3, Text 21. Apanena koile dharma shikana nagai eta siddhanta gita bhagavata gai. Unless one practices devotional service himself, he cannot teach it to others. This conclusion is indeed confirmed throughout the Gita and Bhagavatam. Om Jnanatamidandhasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Mahyam Tathati Supadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Jutapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavanscha Shri Rupam Shagrasatam Sahagana Raganatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savatutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamsya E Krishna Koruna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kamshana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Krisha Panusute Devi Pranamami Hori Priye Vanshako Pitarubhyascha Kripa Sindho Pyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. The Apanena Koile Dharma Shikana Nayai, Eta Siddhanta Gita Bhagavata Gai. The Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, or Kaviraj Goswami has said that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared in order to teach devotional service by practicing it himself. Unless one practices devotional service himself, he cannot teach it to others. So this practical. Srila Prabhupada wanted his followers to practice devotional service. Otherwise, no one likes a hypocrite. And there's no potency to teaching and not following. One has to follow. And that was stated about Advaita Acharya also. that Acharya Samshanat, because he taught devotional service and practiced it by practical activities. Therefore, Acharya, one who teaches by example. Unless one practices devotional service himself, he cannot teach it to others. And now, Siddhanta Bodhe, what is that? Eta Siddhanta Bodhe, Eta Siddhanta Gita Bhagavate Gai. So this was taught in Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. And now we'll have quotation from Bhagavad Gita. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati padata abhyutanam dharmasya sadatmanam samyaham. Whenever and wherever there's a decline in religious practice, O descendants of Padata, and the predominant rise of irreligion, at that time I descend myself. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya chatushkritam dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. To deliver the pious and to annihilate the miscreants, as well as to reestablish the principles of religion, I myself appear millennium after millennium. Purport texts 22 and 23 were spoken by Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. Texts 24 and 24 through 7a, 4, 7 through 8. Texts 24 and 25, which follow, are also to be found in the Bhagavad Gita 3:24, 21. Utside yurime loka nakuryam karma chedaham sankarasya chakartasyam upahanya ima prajaha. If I did not show the proper principles of religion, all these worlds would fall into ruin. I would be the cause of unwanted population and would spoil all these living beings. Yad yada tridati shreshtas tattare vetaro janaha sayat pramanam kurute lokastad anuvartate. Whatever actions a great man performs, common people follow. And whatever standards he sets by exemplary acts, all the world pursues. So much could be said about these verses, but I think the point is made. Ugadharma pravartan hoy angshohete ama vinayanye nade raja prematite. My plenary portions can establish the principles of religion for each age. No one but me, however, can bestow the kind of loving service performed by the residents of Braja. So this purpose is fulfilled by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The Yuga of Dharma appears in every age, and in every Kali Yuga he appears for the sake of establishing the importance of the Sankirtan Yuga Dharma. But only in this age, in this particular Kali Yuga, does Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appear and teach the Krishna Prema. Padvavata Santvavatara Bhava Pankajana Bhasya Savato Vadraha Krishnadam Yakova Taspapi Premado Bhavati. There may be many all auspicious incarnations many all-auspicious incarnations of the personality of Godhead. But who other than Lord Sri Krishna can bestow love of God upon the surrendered souls? Purport. This quotation from the writings of Bilvamangala Thakur is found in the Laghu Bhagavatamrita 1.5.37. Tahate apana bhakta kana korishange pratibhiti avatari karimu nana range. Therefore, in the company of my devotees, I shall appear on earth and perform various colorful pastimes. Etabhavi kali kale pratama sanjay avatirna hoila Krishna apani nadiyai. Thinking thus, the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna himself, descended at Nadia early in the age of Kali. Purport. The Pratam Sandhya is the beginning of the age. According to astronomical calculation, the age is divided into 12 parts. The first of these 12 divisions is known as the Pratam Sandhya. The Pratama Sandhya and Shesha Sandhya, the last division of the preceding age, form the junction of the two ages. According to the Surya Siddhanta, the Pratama Sandhya of Kali Yuga lasts 36,000 solar years. Lord Chaitanya appeared in the Pratama Sandhya after 4,586 solar years of Kali Yuga had passed. Chaitanya Singher Nabadvipe Avatar Singhagriba Singhabirya Singher Onkar. Thus, the lion-like Lord Chaitanya has appeared in Navadvip. He has the shoulders of a lion, the powers of a lion, and the loud voice of a lion. Chait, therefore, is known as Chaitanya Singha. Shai Singha Pasu Tribir Hridai Kandare Kolmachara Trivada Nashe Yahar Vankare. May that lion be seated in the core of the heart of every living being. Thus, with his resounding roar, may he drive away one's elephantine vices. Pratama Lila Tar Vishwambar Nam Bhakti Rashe Harila Tarila Uttagram. In his early pastimes, he is known as Vishwambar because he floods the world with the nectar of devotion and thus saves the living beings. Vishwambar, the name, Vishwa is the universe, and Amra, Vishwamkara, and Para means who sustains the whole time. Filled here, Ubrin Tatur Arta Poshana Taran Ushila Tarila Prema Dia Tribhavan. The verbal root to bring, which is the root of the word Vishwambar, indicates nourishing and maintaining. Lord Chaitanya nourishes and maintains the three worlds by distributing love of God. So there you've got the proper derivation of the Shankara. Shesha Lila Dharenam Sri Krishna Chaitanya Sri Krishna Janaye Shaba Vishva Koilo Tanya. In his later pastimes, he is known as Lord Sri Krishna Chaitanya. He blesses the whole world by teaching about the name and fame of Lord Sri Krishna. Purport. Lord Chaitanya remained a householder only until his 24th year had passed. Then he entered the renounced order and remained manifest in this material world until his 48th year. Therefore, his Shesha Lila, the final portion of his activities, lasted 24 years. Some so-called Vaishnavas say that the renounced order of life was not accepted in the Vaishnava Sampradaya, or disciplic succession, until Lord Chaitanya. This is not a very intelligent proposition. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took the sannyas order from Sripad Keshav Bharati, who belonged to the Shankara sect, which approves of only 10 names for sannyasis. Long before the advent of Sripad Shankaracharya, however, the sannyas order existed in the Vaishnava line of Vishnu Swami. In the Vishnu Swami Vaishnava Sampradaya, there are 10 different kinds of sannyas names and 108 different names for sannyasis who accept the Tridanda, the triple staff of sannyas. This is approved by the Vedic rules. Therefore, Vaishnava sannyas was existent even before the appearance of Shankaracharya, although those who know nothing about Vaishnava sannyas unnecessarily declare that there's no sannyas in the Vaishnava Sampradaya. During the time of Lord Chaitanya, the influence of Shankaracharya in society was very strong. People thought that one could accept sannyas only in the disciplic succession of Shankaracharya. Lord Chaitanya could have performed his missionary activities as a householder, but he found householder life an obstruction to his mission. Therefore, he decided to accept the renounced order, sannyas. Since his acceptance of sannyas was also designed to attract public attention, Lord Chaitanya, not wishing to disturb the social convention, took the renounced order of life from a sannyasi in the disciplic succession of Shankaracharya, although sannyas was also sanctioned in the Vaishnava Sampradaya. In the Shankara Sampradaya, there are 10 different names awarded to sannyasis. 1, Tirtha, 2, Ashram, 3, Van, 4, Aranya, 5, Giri, 6, Parvat, 7, Sagri, 8, Saraswati, 9, Aditi, and 10, Puri. Before one enters sannyas, he has one of the various names for a brahmachari, the assistant to a sannyasi. Sannyasis with the titles Tirtha and Ashram generally stay at Dwarka, and their brahmachari name is Swarup. Those known by the names Vana and Aranya stay at Purushottam, or Jagannath Puri, and their brahmachari name is Prakash. Those with the names Giri, Parvat, and Sagar generally stay at Bhadrakashram, and their brahmachari name is Ananda. Those with the titles Saraswati, Bharati, and Puri usually live at Sringeri in South India, and their brahmachari name is Caitanya. Sripad Shankaracharya established 4 monasteries in India in the 4 directions: north, south, east, and west, and he entrusted them to 4 sannyasis who were his disciples. Now there are hundreds of branch monasteries under these 4 principal monasteries, and although there is an official symmetry among them, there are many differences in their dealings. The 4 different sects of these monasteries are known as Anandavara, Bhogavara, Kitavara, and Bhumivara. And in course of time, they have developed different ideas and different slogans. According to the regulation of the disciplic succession, one who wishes to enter the renounced order in Shankara's sect must first be trained as a brahmachari under a bona fide sannyasi. The brahmachari's name is ascertained according to the group in which the sannyasi belongs. Lord Chaitanya accepted sannyas from Keshav-Bharati. When he first approached Keshav-Bharati, he was accepted as a brahmachari with the name Sri Krishna Chaitanya Brahmachari. After he took sannyas, he preferred to keep the name Krishna Chaitanya. The great authorities in the disciplic succession had not offered to explain why Lord Chaitanya refused to take the name Bharati after he took sannyas from a Bharati, until Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj volunteered the explanation that because a sannyasi in the Shankara Sampradaya thinks that he has become supreme, Lord Chaitanya, wanting to avoid such a misconception, kept the name Sri Krishna Chaitanya, placing himself as an eternal servitor. A brahmachari is supposed to serve the spiritual master. Therefore, he did not negate that relationship of servitude to his spiritual master. Accepting such a position is favorable for the relationship between the disciple and the spiritual master. The authentic biographies also mention that Lord Chaitanya accepted the danda, rod, and pegging pan, symbolic of the sannyas order, at the time he took sannyas. So here we find that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accepted sannyas in the Shankara order for the sake of preaching, but kept his brahmachari name to honor the conclusion that every living being is an eternal servant of Krishna, and that when one accepts sannyas, he still remains an eternal servant of the representative of Krishna, the bona fide spiritual master. We've read a lot here. Are there any questions or comments? Question 1, elephantine vices like what? from Vijay Krishna. Now, that was some verses back. If I remember, elephantine vices refer to the vices of the conditions.
Text 31, Maharaj.
Yeah. Would you like to read it for me, since involves backing up a lot in the Kindle?
May that lion be seated in the core of the heart of every living being. Thus, with his resounding roar, may he drive away one's elephantine vices.
Yeah. Well, first, there are the vices of for the residents of Kali Yuga: intoxicants, gambling, meat eating, and illicit sex. And underlying all these vices is the vice of thinking that one is one with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We were reading last night that the conditioned soul wants to establish oneness with God by imitating God. One wants to become the enjoyer, one wants to become the controller. And this is a huge vice, elephantine. An elephant is big and heavy. So this is a heavy vice, to think oneself one with the Supreme Personality of God and to try to establish oneness with the Master and not accept one's eternal position as servant. The Kendra people.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. As we were reading the section describing the timeline of Kali Yuga, the Pratama Sandhya, and how the Yuga is divided into 12 sections, it occurred to me that, and probably this question has been asked so many times, but I'd love to hear from you, that we understand there's a certain period in the beginning of Kali Yuga that's known as the Golden Age of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, where we have a great opportunity to get out of the material world just by chanting Hare Krishna. And then after this Pratama Sandhya, which has got a lot of years left on it, then it seems like and that's also including, by that time, the Golden Age is long over as well. And the next incarnation we have to look forward to at that point is Kalki Avatar. And so that's still about 400,000 years for Kali Yuga to really pick up steam. And I'm wondering that during that time, it almost seems like living entities and human bodies are degraded to such a state that it's just like animal life, and it's their chances for escaping the material world seem fairly slim because everything's just shutting down. And is this a point that you'd care to comment on?
We can barely imagine how degraded Kali Yuga becomes. Just taking my own short lifetime, not even my own short lifetime, but all right, my own short lifetime, we can look at a few small-time vices in my mother's generation. There were certain things that a girl just didn't do before marriage. Now those things, now the sort of standard is that all of those things are accepted. Yes, accepted, and that the standard for marriage these days is that a boy and girl live together, and if they find they get on well, then they marry. And that, of course, after the boy and girl have become, shall we say, sexually well experienced. That standard, even in 1960s, was not so well established. Coeducational dormitories, to say nothing of coeducational bathrooms and so on, were not to be found. In my youth, the idea that one would be proud to be homosexual was not entertained. Risk seeming, what should we say, just dictatorial and undemocratic if you suggest that there's something inferior about the choice to be homosexual, transsexual, bisexual. They keep adding letters to that string. When I was in my childhood, I knew only one family member who'd been divorced, and that also was looked upon with some disapproval. Now, 50% is the divorce rate, even in places like Bombay. We hear abortion was something very outside the norm. And now women have a right to an abortion, at least in some of the states, since the Supreme Court has ruled that the Constitution doesn't seem to offer a constitutional right to abortion. The court reversed the previous court's decision that women had a constitutional right to an abortion. And the present court has said, no, they don't. But the states can defend, as New York has quickly done, I think, a woman's right to reproductive freedom, that is, toward killing the child in the womb. So all this degradation has occurred within, say, 50 years. 50 years, 60 years, which is nothing when we're counting in the hundreds of thousands or even tens of thousands. When all of this is going on, where will we be in 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 years? Where will human society be when in just 60 years we've gone from degradation to greater degradation in quite dramatically? So Kali Yuga, when we sort of routinely say that men will be like animals, what kind of animals they'll be, you can barely imagine. Is that okay? Do you want to add anything there, Kendra? Saraswati says, it is mentioned there were sahajiyas or sannyasis in the Vishnu Swami Sampradaya, which is descended from Rudra, and Pushti Marg is under this Sampradaya. But current gurus in this Sampradaya don't accept sannyas. But I was told Sri Ballabhacharya actually did accept sannyas in his old age, which I didn't know. But Pushti Marg gurus are descendants of Ballabhacharya, and no one else outside this family can be a guru. Yes, this is, you know very well the traditions of the Pushti Mark Sampradaya, where sannyas is not, what should we say, uh, highly esteemed, where it's not generally, not at all accepted or embraced by the present group. But in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, therefore, we hear Vairagya Vidya Nijbhakti Yoga Shikshartameka Purusha Purana Sri Krishna Chaitanya Shriratad Kripambhati Ya Tamaham Prapadye. That Chaitanya Mahaprabhu especially came to teach Vairagya Vidya, transcendental knowledge and detachment, Vairagya, Nija Bhakti Yoga, and devotional service to himself. So, and in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's line, his chief lieutenants, as Prabhupada put it, were the 6 Goswamis, and many others also who accepted Vairagya, renounced life. Of course, the 6 Goswamis didn't formally accept the sannyas. They were Babajis, but they were all effectively sannyasis. Raghunath Das Goswami left home, left his young and beautiful wife, and the estate of his father, Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami, left the court of Nawab Hussain Shah. So they were all sannyasis of the highest order. And of course, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu left his young wife and elderly mother. Prabhupada said, for the sake of Lord Bhaktivinoda Thakur, for the sake of the greater family of Krishna and all humanity. So this acceptance of the sannyas order is prominent in the Chaitanya Sampradaya. But in Pushti Mark, we don't see that. Praveen says, knowing his readers would be a Western audience, Prabhupada puts in so many details of the sannyas order and also the Shankara sect. Seems he detailed from the Acharya commentaries. I would think Prabhupada would translate only what is relevant. Srila Prabhupada is following here, as far as I understand, the commentary of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. In Chaitanya, in Bhagavad Gita as it is, he's following Baladev Vijabhushan. In Chaitanya Caritamrita, he follows Bhaktivinoda Thakur, especially in the chapter summaries, if I recall, and the commentary of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And often, in fact, the commentaries or Srila Prabhupada's commentaries just follow when we hear about the railway line from here to there and so on. Srila Prabhupada didn't seem to find it necessary to update the railway details. He simply repeats what his spiritual master has said. But sometimes Srila Prabhupada goes to great lengths to make things relevant for the modern Western audience, or sometimes adds a word here, a comment there, for the sake of a Western audience, or very often, both in Chaitanya Caritamrita and his other writings, he simply puts things in such a way that they're intelligible he doesn't really comment extensively about the Western context. Sometimes he does, but often doesn't comment extensively about the Western context. He just translates things in such a way that they're intelligible to us. So Prabhupada takes different approaches, sometimes extensive commentary, sometimes just leaving things as they are, and sometimes just translating things in such a way that we have just enough access to understand things properly. Mahesh Pandit Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. Always Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Maharaj, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took the sannyas, and it reminded me one incident that people were arrogant. I mean, his students were arrogant, and
Yes.
he was running a school, and he said, "No, this is not the way to do it." So he decided that since everybody gives respect to sannyasi. So then he decided, that's it, I'm going to take the sannyas. So it's just a little comment.
Yes, that's recited in Chaitanya's Caritamrita, that the students were criticizing him, and then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu thought that this is not good, and he accepted sannyas because the convention then was to give great respect to a sannyasi. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took this approach that, all right, if I'm a sannyasi, they'll offer me respect, so let me accept sannyas. Also, he, particularly for his preaching to the Mayavadi sannyasis, he found sannyas helpful. And also, apart from the outward program of preaching and the instructiveness also of leaving behind family attachments, well, let's not say aside from, that was another purpose. He leaves behind family attachments, even though his attachments are to such exalted devotees as Sachi Devi and Vishnu Priya. Vishnu Priya was so exalted that she would take, after Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's sannyas, she would chant one round and put aside one grain of rice. And at the end of the day, however much rice was there, that's what she would cook and take as her prasad. Such an exalted devotee, virtually the goddess of fortune. And from a material point of view, still a young girl, and his wife, his mother, an elderly woman. And he was the only remaining son. Vishnu had already taken sannyas. And still Chaitanya Mahaprabhu left. Sometimes we're asked this question, that why should one accept sannyas if one's wife is a devotee, if family life is favorable? But we find that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, even with such exalted devotees as his wife and mother, still left home to read, preach, and to focus on devotional service. It would be hard to imagine Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes at Puri with his wife and mother present. It would be an entirely different presentation. But he sets that standard. He leaves behind family life, even with such a wife and mother.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you, Hare Krishna. Tulsi Priya.
I rechecked my question, Maharaj. Thank you.
Okay. Vijay Krishna, where will we be? Most certainly, we will be dancing the samba with Kali himself in complete surrender to his whims and in complete ignorance about what is right and what is wrong. Utmost degradation, if I may say it, Maharaj. Yes, dancing the samba with Kali.
Maharaj, how many years for that?
Kali Yuga lasts what? 437,000 years, of which only 5,000 and roughly passed. So we expect some relatively short time. We hear 10,000 years for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's moving. Prabhupada said like an eddy in a river. The river is generally going in one direction, but there may be an eddy, a little small portions traveling in the opposite direction. So for some small time in Kali Yuga, things become wonderfully Krishna conscious, but otherwise degraded, more degraded, more degraded. We also see, we talked about people in general, but the leaders of the world become dasyu prayeshu rajasu. They become like plunderers, not just thieves, but plunderers. A thief just steals your money. A plunderer, it beats you up and takes your money. They'll steal other people's wives. They'll steal their money. Already in Kali Yuga, we won't go into what we think of the governments of the world and what they're really doing, how they're plundering already. But we were hearing, there was some discussion on where was that? Within the last few days. I know I was in the Middle East and there was some discussion of the previous rulers in what's now the United Arab Emirates, and how the rulers would feel that their subjects were like their children. How the rulers would feel that their subjects were like their children. This, of course, was the Vedic standard. Kings like Maharaj Parikshit, Yudhisthira Maharaj, Lord Ramchandra, and so on, had set such a high standard in that regard that their subjects were like their children, to be affectionately taken care of and protected. And even say the Muslim rulers in recent times shows some honor to that idea, to say nothing of the Vedic kings who are the great Hindu kings. But what we have now, just plunderers. And we will start that discussion. Saraswati says, isn't it said, a small section of some people will prefer to live in jungles in Kali Yuga with the animals rather than under demons ruling the country. Yes, in Bhagavatam, 11th canto. And it's practical. It makes sense that when the rulers of the country, when they are just sucking out your life by taxes, by draconian measures for control of your every movement, by just making life unbearable, then the forest becomes an attractive choice. In the forest, all right, I have to live on roots and berries, but there are roots and berries. There's something in the forest, and there's no president or king government to suck out my every last drop of blood. The forest seems not so bad. Now, none of us would want to go to the forest. It seems so impossible to live there. But in the future, the towns and cities of the world will seem far worse, and the forest will be an attractive proposition. Dasya Pradesh. Tulsi Priya, last question.
Hi, Krishna. This is a different question. I still didn't remember the first one. Please accept my obeisances, Maharaj. It seems like there's a kind of insidious dynamic going on, like when you talked about certain deviant behaviors, that now they're, just part of normal life and people accept them. And part of the reason for that is that there's been a sort of situation where those people who engage in deviant behaviors have been seen as oppressed. And so out of sympathy, or let's say they get tired of being oppressed, and out of sympathy, the people who aren't engaged in those deviant behaviors show some support. And then it goes from being oppressed to being not oppressed, to being accepted, to being normalized, to being expected behavior. And I can talk about certain things that have happened in my life where I've seen it happen, seen things like that happen. For instance, like they talk about the whole situation with women being, sexually abused, raped, whatever. And I said, one way you can cut back on 90% of all rapes is when you go out, don't get blind drunk. And even amongst devotees, I have said this, and they become outraged, and they call me a rape apologist. And I said, look, without getting into the gory details, you don't know what's happened to me. But when I stopped hanging around with bad association and going to bad places and doing stupid things, bad things stopped happening to me. And they don't want to hear it. And I said, is that a coincidence? Is it a coincidence that, bad things stop happening when you stop doing stupid things? So it's very hard, because you get this idea that somehow people are being oppressed when, my personal motto is everybody is their own worst enemy. So yeah, there's always going to be some bad things happening for no apparent good reason, but it seems like the way these things become normalized is because of this idea that people are oppressed, they're being abused, they're whatever. And then those who aren't victims take on the cause, and gradually things become more and more and more and more normalized. And
Prabhupada gave the example. It's famous. He was walking past a latrine in Mayapur that hadn't been cleaned in far too long, and was smelling terribly. And Prabhupada objected that this latrine has not been cleaned. But his big objection was, none of you have noticed it. He was walking with sannyasis, managers, leaders from Mayapur. None of you have noticed it. So this latrine is so neglected. That's a sign of the mode of ignorance. And you haven't noticed it. That means you're in the same ignorance. So when Kali Yuga is, when people are in the mode of goodness and they see these aberrations from the standard of human life, then they at once notice it. And those who are in the mode of ignorance accommodate, sympathize, work tirelessly to establish degradation as a constitutional right, and so on. They just become blinded. I know, I've told the story before, that one of my friends, Adya Prabhu from Gujarat, American Gujarati, and his mother came from Gujarat, and they went to a supermarket, and she saw something, and she asked, "What is that?" And he said, "Well, it's meat." And then further, that it was the meat of cow. And she began to cry. The shoppers are just, picking up these little packages nicely wrapped in cellophane to take home for their kids and their husbands. But because they're in the mode of ignorance, all of them. But a sensitive person, a civilized person, sees these things and begins to cry. So the Vaishnavas are cry at the misfortune of the people who are caught up by these waves of passion and ignorance and Kali Yuga, especially ignorance. But those who are ignorant find different ways to wave flags and go to court and campaign for the right to be degraded, the right to be seen as just as good as everyone else, or to have one's preferences seen to be on an equal level with everyone else's. This is Kali Yuga, and for that matter, even to disparage those who follow human standards. In a modern university, for a girl to be, oh my God, still a virgin, makes her something like a social pariah. So this is the standard of Kali Yuga. All right, it's Janmashtami here. It's time to get going. If we can have a kirtan, and then we'll see you again on Monday. Thank you all very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Sankirtan.
Yes.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Rama Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare.
Jai Om Shnupad Panamusa Pripraja Kacharja Ashto Shri Srimad A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Raj Prabhupada Ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai, Namacharya Sridhar Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Shari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai, Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sham Radha Kumiki Govardhan Ki Jai, Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Bhagavad Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Ki Jai, Ganga Mai Ki Jai, Jamana Mai Ki Jai, Tulsi Devi Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you for your class.
Thank you very much, Mahesh Pandit Prabhu.
And I wish you happy Janmashtami for tomorrow, or you already have it.
It's a happy Janmashtami here and a happy Janmashtami to you tomorrow. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Janmashtami as Buddha. Hare Krishna.
Just want to
Thank
point
you.
out, Hare Krishna, I just want to point out there are some links to lectures from Maharaj in Dubai, from Julan Yatra, Balaram Purnim. So if you want to copy those real quick, you can watch them. Otherwise, yeah, you can look in the ISKCON Dubai YouTube, which I believe is called, Academy of Vedic Sciences on YouTube. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Jai.